Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning for our friends on the West Coast. I'm Collette Spagnolo, Global VP of Marketing Analytics at DoubleVerify, and I'm based in our global headquarters here in New York. It's so great to be here today. I'm going to start by welcoming everyone to our 2023 Global Insights Report webinar. Our mission at DoubleVerify is to make digital advertising stronger, safer, and more secure. And transparency across the industry and thought leadership are both critical to this mission, which is why we are all here today. DV's Global Insights Report provides advertisers with an in-depth market-by-market analysis spanning APAC, EMEA, LATAM, and North America to help inform digital advertising strategies. This is the 7th annual Global Insights Report, and our findings have become more robust each and every year. This year, our very talented analytics team looked at media quality and performance trends from 5.5 trillion media transactions, over 1,000 customers in nearly 100 countries. But today's focus is, of course, on the Americas, which covers the US, Canada, and LATAM. So I'll be taking us through the findings from the report with specific insights from North America and LATAM, and a fireside chat with our panelists will follow. But before I start my presentation, let me first have our panelists, Gian LaVecchia and Shannon Brungs Hartmann, introduce themselves. John, let's start with you.
Great, thanks so much, Collette. Good day, everyone. My name is Gian LaVecchia, and I'm the Managing Director of the Americas at DoubleVerify. Very happy to be with everyone today. This should be a great session.
Hi, and I'm Shannon Hartmann, and I am leading our programmatic buying team for our managed service offerings here at Kroger Precision Marketing. Thank you for having me.
Great, thank you both for joining. A little housekeeping for our audience. You can ask questions in the Zoom Q&A box throughout the session. We'll also have some time set aside at the end to review those questions in a Q&A session. And with all of that said, let's get into it. So this year's Global Insights Report explores 3 key themes. First, always on, the state of media quality for protected and unprotected advertisers, and why it is so important to ensure that verification is always on. Second, verify everywhere, the importance of verifying all media across all channels. And impact everywhere, how quality creates the right foundation for performance and attention. In many ways, verification is like a security system. Security systems offer protection in 3 key ways. They act as a deterrent, they sound an alarm in the event of an emergency, and they monitor and record activity. And if you think about it, a holistic verification system operates similarly. Pre-bid activation avoids quality violations before they even happen. Post-bid blocking and filtering both halt ad delivery in unacceptable environments, and the monitoring process documents and reports activity, and that can be used to inform planning and, of course, optimization. This might sound very obvious, but you need your security system to be on in order for it to work, right? Well, the same goes for verification. For advertisers to achieve the full protection of a verification system, the system needs to be always on, and it needs to be turned on everywhere. It's important to keep your verification on and running so that it can provide a foundation of quality. Before we jump into our findings, I'm curious from the audience, do you think the state of quality improved, declined, or remained the same over the past year? I'm going to launch a poll here and give everyone a second to respond. All right, interesting dichotomy here. 44% of people said that they think that it improved over the last year, but a whole 35% said that they thought it declined, and 21% saying remained the same. So what actually happened? Let's find out. On a global level, the results are very positive. Our benchmark brand suitability violation rate has remained at 7.1% for the 2nd year in a row. We saw post-bid fraud and sophisticated invalid traffic decrease for the 3rd consecutive year. However, the total number of new fraud schemes actually doubled from 2020 to 2022, meaning that while pre-bid fraud protections certainly mitigate the damage that fraudsters can do, the protections don't actually stop them from concocting new schemes that are aimed at siphoning ad spend. And from 2019 to 2022, viewable rates have consistently increased. Our display viewable rate's at 69%, and the video viewable rate is even higher at 74%, which is now comfortably above the IAB's recommended threshold of 70%. So taken all together, brand suitability, fraud, and viewability seem to be stabilizing or improving. And these positive changes are primarily driven by enhanced pre-bid protections, including authentic brand suitability. So this is what's happening globally, but what about trends from the Americas? The answer is very nuanced. For the very first time, the US actually crossed IAB's 70% viewability threshold across both display and video ads. It should also be noted that LATAM is seeing some of the highest viewability among all regions at around 75% across display and video. In North America, we also found the lowest post-bid brand suitability violation rates at 6.4%. However, in Canada, we actually saw an 18% increase in brand suitability rates to 8.4%. North America also reduced its fraud violation rate for the third year in a row. While fraud violations decreased by only 6% in Canada and only 4% in the US last year, both markets saw a much more significant decrease this year, down 29% in North America overall. And that's driven by all devices other than CTV, which we'll get to in a second. And despite a global decrease in post-bid fraud rates, the fraud violation rate has continued climbing in LATAM with a 16% increase year over year. Content consumption on mobile apps has surged in LATAM, and the region has seen fraud rates increase across mobile app and mobile web over the past 3 years, even as global mobile app fraud rates have been slowly declining. What all this tells us is that there are many local nuances that impact quality, and that is why keeping verification in place in all these places is so critical. So the data we've discussed so far has been what we saw post-bid for protected or managed DV advertisers. But to get under the hood and see what the data would show for unprotected advertisers, DV ran a test campaign with no protections in place whatsoever. We'll refer to this as the unmanaged campaign. And the results of that campaign provided transparency into media quality when verification is not in use, or in other words, the cost of doing nothing. So what happened on that campaign? We saw 367% more fraud than unmanaged campaigns. And on peak days, the fraud for the unmanaged campaign actually spiked to nearly 25%, meaning on those days, 1 out of every 4 impressions was wasted on fraud. For viewability, the unmanaged campaign's viewability performance was significantly worse than managed campaigns. Video viewability in particular was 42% lower, demonstrating the necessity of measuring and optimizing to viewability. Lastly, the unmanaged campaign had a 94% higher brand suitability violation rate versus our managed campaigns. And this represents a real risk to unmanaged advertisers. So a question that must be on everyone's mind is, how much do violations actually cost? What is the cost of doing nothing? So we ran an assessment on our unmanaged campaign to estimate how much it stood to lose for every billion impressions served. And the potential loss is substantial. This slide shows the estimated US dollars loss per billion impressions on the unmanaged campaign relative to fraud, viewability, and brand suitability. It just goes to show when you don't have protection in place throughout the entire media transaction, impressions and therefore ad dollars go to waste. It is critical for your verification strategy to adapt as your media strategy evolves. So going back to our example of the security system, if you put an addition on your house, but you didn't add a camera in that new space, you just opened up a hole in your protection. And this philosophy applies to your verification system too. An always-on strategy has to extend to all places where people consume media and therefore where they see ads. So what are those new places? Social, CTV, audio, all of these new platforms present new ways to engage with audiences for advertisers. But the channels are not immune to quality concerns, not least because they perform differently from other media types. For example, in social, TikTok boasts strong audibility with 97% of impressions serving with sound on. In audio, one fraud scheme we tracked this year, called Beat Sting, targeted audio platforms and was siphoning over $1 million a month from advertisers. And when buying from retail media networks, some advertisers might be surprised to learn their ads don't always show up on the retailer sites. In fact, audience extension placements are very prevalent in this space, which Shannon will talk about in a few minutes, I'm sure. And that does have reach benefits for advertisers, but they also come with a mixed bag of concerning and good quality. We see a 129% higher violation rate for fraud and brand suitability, but also a 91% higher viewable rate when compared to retailer sites directly. Insights like these help advertisers understand how to best leverage these channels, and it provides an apples to apples comparison with their other media placements. But those are just 3 examples. You can imagine how this extends to all the new, nuanced, emerging platforms for advertisers. And one of those platforms is, of course, CTV. An increase in streaming subscriptions is fueling CTV's ascent globally. And as CTV becomes a top channel for both consumers and advertisers alike, measurement and protection are also becoming increasingly important, because I think we all know with growth comes growing pains. So first, that growth. CTV verification and measurement was up 61% in the US and a whopping 453% in Brazil this year. But then there are the growing pains. Our unmanaged campaign had over 17.6 times more fraud than managed campaigns. And this makes sense because the DV Fraud Lab caught 3 times as many CTV schemes in 2022 versus just 2 years ago. So throughout this presentation, our data has been making the case for quality verification across all platforms. But coming back to our security system example, when you have a security system in place, you have a safe environment where you are comfortable investing in making improvements to your home. And in the case of media buying, we are talking about investing more in capturing attention and driving performance. Attention enables advertisers to optimize campaign performance and increase their return on ad spend. When buying media, you need to consider both exposure and engagement to fully maximize your ad's impact. DV Authentic Attention is a privacy-friendly solution that provides impression-level insights at scale. Authentic Attention analyzes more than 50 data points, both on how an ad is presented and on how a user interacts with the ad or the device. And together, this measures campaign effectiveness, which can help refine media planning and improve performance for advertisers. Our report this year takes a deep dive into attention, but let's look at just 2 of the key factors that drive performance. First, choosing the right ad placement requires specific insights about how those placements drive performance. And you would think that advertisers would prioritize the domains that drive the highest attention, but that's not always the case, as this graph shows. A high volume of domains are actually lower performing. That's the pink and, of course, the yellow bars. But there is still a huge opportunity to capture attention by focusing on domains that do drive higher exposure and engagement, which would be the bars at the top in green. What else matters? Just like in real estate, location is key. Exposure and engagement vary significantly at a regional level. A primary driver of attention differences between regions is actually inventory buying strategies. In North America, we have the greatest opportunity across both display and video to use attention metrics to better optimize campaigns. For video in particular, North America now lags behind all other regions when it comes to both viewability and attention. What about LATAM? Display performance lagged in LATAM. More than half of the region's display ad creatives were small and purchased programmatically. Without optimization, this can result in lower attention metrics. All of this helps to explain the performance and why where you buy matters. So That's a quick overview of the main trends that we cover in our recently released Global Insights report. And now I'm going to bring John and Shannon back to discuss these trends and what they mean for advertisers. So let's start by getting an understanding of the ad verification landscape across North America and LATAM by diving into the macro trends that we have found. Shannon, my first question is for you. Overall, post-bid quality continues to improve according to our research. Essentially, this means that protected advertisers are benefiting from implementing verification strategies. How have you made this an imperative at Kroger Precision Marketing?
Thanks. Yeah, I think overall, I would attribute some of that improvement not only to the tech, but also to the education. And that's kind of how we've improved our own KPM stance on this. We've found that we have to do a little bit of an art and a science here. We've come a very long way over the years. After many, many, many tests, we attack it from a couple different ways. So at a core, every campaign has a set of core standards as a base based on ad environment, like you mentioned, between video and display, knowing that those are kind of different and the nuances between them warrant different protection. And then we customize from there. So within our base, we activate advanced pre-bid settings with double verify, specifically authentic brand safety. This is something that we've tested both on and off, and we found a lot of success in it. It's taken away a lot of the need for as many post-bid optimizations, which we know as scope and teams grow and everyone else is tight on time. It really does help because those manual optimizations are pretty cumbersome. And it's helping bridging the gap between double verify reporting, but then also what are we able to actually optimize hands-on keys in the DSP. It's helping us avoid a lot of brand risk, but not reducing scale and balancing those fees, which I think is kind of a misconception a lot of times. So working with the pre-bids together and really having a strong strategy and the jump of a campaign is really helping in the long term reduce that ad waste out. And then the customization on top of that is the form of art. So what we do is we customize based off of the client, the campaign, but then also those optimizations. So we do take a pretty strong stance on post-bid optimizations, looking at all of our double verify reporting, but not just looking at the site, which I think sometimes we get caught up in our ways of just optimizing in a day-to-day. But we're really trying to look at all of the different elements of a campaign that we have access to between ad size, SSP, fold placement, all of that, and actually taking a bid down strategy on what's not working to help balance some of those fees and costs, but really heighten that brand safety across multiple KPIs.
That's a great point. Shannon, for you, we sometimes get questions from clients about whether they can or should turn verification off at certain times. Sounds like you don't recommend that, but can you speak to how you advise your clients when they might ask this question of you?
Yeah, so we really take the stance of each campaign, client, and even moment in time is very different. We can't see the future and we don't know when something is going to come up in the world or something a little more passive than that. I think a lot of time people only think of brand safety in terms of heavy news or national news, and that's just not the case. It can be just an ill-placed ad next to content that isn't necessarily brand safe, isn't necessarily not safe, but it's just not suitable. Those are the type of things that end up going viral though for brands. So you pop up even when we are doing like onboarding and training decks for our new hires to put this into concepts. Sometimes you find some of these examples, and that's what you want to avoid. You want our advertisers and brands to be and our shoppers inherently, since we're using first-party data at KPM, to be protected, and that's always at the forefront. So regardless of a client's preference, we always enable our own brand safety standards, but then we take a double approach that if a client also has their own standards, we layer on top of it and double up that safety essentially to protect every single campaign as a base requirement.
That's great. So John, KPM has a clear strategy for making sure that their clients are protected. I think from our research, ensuring coverage across all channels and formats at all times has been shown to be critical. Thinking more on the advertiser side, how do advertisers make this something that is actually consistent across all of their media buys? And I'm thinking primarily about huge global brands who have multiple LOBs, different brands, different regions, maybe 100 markets. How can an advertiser make that consistent?
Great. Thanks so much for the question. So at DV, we believe in the idea of verify everywhere, to your earlier comment in the research report. Providing brands with consistent, always-on coverage across all impressions, media, markets, and platforms, is absolutely imperative. And by embracing that approach, marketers can ensure the highest level of media quality, allowing for greater transparency and consistency across all facets of their digital media activations. In terms of governance and design for these complex portfolio-oriented businesses, it's certainly challenging, but something that we have done quite a bit with a number of the largest brands in the world. So first, it's important for those marketers to define the core brand guidelines that will both inform benchmarks and begin to establish those foundational guardrails for the business. From there, advertisers need to get comfortable with regularly calibrating their efforts via brand safety and suitability controls to better protect their brands from appearing alongside unsafe content, or more appropriately in this instance, content that's not suitable for them, taking in to consideration those regional nuances and other considerations to ensure that we're driving impact at the most granular level. Again, the goal being, how do we employ a level of precision and impact without compromising scale in any way? Of course, these guidelines are only effective and can only be compared and contrasted across regions and LOBs if those same standards are being applied consistently across the board. It is imperative, but once you have that in place, it's a governance plan that is designed to scale for global brands, again, starting at the macro and being able to work down all the way through the micro with specific LOBs within specific regions.
Great. So just building on that, DV likes to say that we cannot treat brand safety and suitability as a one-size-fits-all approach. And I'm curious, now that we've spoken about from our perspective, what are some criteria that advertisers should be considering when they do craft their strategy, especially, John, to maximize protection without compromising scale, as you just said? Shannon, we could start with you.
Yeah, so unlike an ad agency or traditional ad network, we actually have two brands to keep in mind, even if Kroger isn't in the message. So this is where one size fits all really doesn't work for us. And then if you think about outside of even just Kroger, any kind of retailer, there are so many different brands in that store that have different risk assessments, and they have a different tolerance for risk, whether you are someone in the baby aisle or you are somewhere in the energy drink aisle. Those are very different look, tones, feels of that creative. And where you show up is really the contextual relevance there that you have to keep in mind. So this is where we start to customize a little bit more on top of just the ad environment, or even the publishers, or even the audiences that we're curating. Because we're based off of that first party data too, we really have to look at that scale piece that John just mentioned, because it is a factor as well when we create our blueprints and our strategy for the different ad environments and clients, depending on how many households they actually have to target and things like that. So we really have to look at each campaign and sometimes strategize when it's coming down the pipe to say, what do we want this to look like? What are the things we're not considering? And building off our blueprints and LOBs off of that.
John, anything to add? Yeah.
Of course. So, I think we all well understand that the world that we're living in today is inherently complex and turbulent. And while if we look back in history, there have always been these moments of disruption, the reality is brands are facing market pressures that are unprecedented, that are diverse, and have never been more challenging. So as we navigate this marketplace, unfortunately, there isn't a one size fits all, but I actually see that as a positive because, again, brands have the unique opportunity to calibrate based on their needs, their resonance in market, the way they want to be positioned, and also, again, make sure that you're maximizing efficiencies without minimizing market impact. So just a couple quick high-level considerations as marketers begin this journey. I think it's really important to, again, ground themselves and work through the fundamentals to crystallize the distinction between brand safety which is focusing on providing that protection around universally unsafe content that we are all very familiar with, and brand suitability, right? Which helps brands navigate the nuance around specific content that may be unsuitable for that particular advertiser. Just again, back to my earlier point about regional nuances, LOB nuances, et cetera. If well calibrated, marketers are going to find themselves continuing to elevate the quality and performance of their media buys without compromising scale. Again, this can be regularly revisited. The entire idea here is that this is flexible, but it has, it offers the opportunity for a principled approach and one that can be optimized over time if needed.
Great, thank you. Shannon, so our protected advertisers in North America in particular have decreased their brand suitability violations over the last 2 years. So that shows improvement and stability year over year. But what are some of the factors that the brands that you actually work with are most concerned about when it comes to brand safety and suitability? What still comes up in conversation frequently?
Yeah, we get a lot of discussions around news, to be honest. I think a lot of people do. News and alcohol for us specifically, because we're a grocer, a retailer, and that is a thing. But especially around news, that seems to be the biggest point of debate a lot of times in the industry. Our perspective is not all news is bad news. And while it feels like that sometimes, unfortunately, we try and educate that there's really an opportunity to get very clear on the content blocks that we do, using a little bit more contextual advertising so that it fits with the brand. You're not just serving heavily on news if the news articles aren't about your brand or about the thing within your brand. And then also negative keywords and blocks that we do post bid and everything like that. So we really think that if we can customize your suitability and run it as a test and then allow for allow lists and things like that, we can really hone in on those things and not take the sledgehammer approach, because there's a lot of wonderful news organizations out there, and we can be selective as selective as we want without losing that good content.
Great, thank you. So let's move on to fraud. Shannon, as CTV consumption continues to grow, as we saw a 61% increase in North America, are you concerned about fraudsters exploiting premium ad spend for unprotected advertisers in particular?
Yes, yes. I think what's really kind of mind-blowing for us as buyers and even people in the industry is the level of sophistication that goes behind CTV fraud. And that's where I think there's still a little bit of education there, because maybe not traditional fraud is passing through like a login experience, but there are that insidious forms of fraud that are just kind of insane to think about the turned off TV fraud and everything like that. But what I find hope in too is that as AI and fraud is learning, so will we, and that we will be able to wrap our hands around it and really stand up really good optimizations and solutions to avoid this in the future and cut it down without, again, reducing that scale or only serving on a couple pieces of content. So yes, it does scare me, but I have faith in this very technology that is fueling the fraud in some senses to protect us as well.
John, that sets you up really well. I think, how can you explain how DV actually protects clients in CTV environments?
Yeah, of course. So just as a background here, DV has always been at the forefront of driving innovation across CTV formats, across both fraud and viewability measurement for the last number of years. As it relates to fraud specifically at its most simple level, DV protects brands by leveraging a combination of machine learning with a world-class dedicated fraud lab team. This is a real dedicated team that are working together to recognize those patterns that are indicative of fraud across a number of different categories in the space, including server farms, fraudulent apps, app spoofing, etc. Once those fraud schemes are identified, DV will then partner with all facets of the ecosystem, from buyers to sellers to the platforms themselves, all focus on extracting that activity or fraudulent traffic from the marketplace. It's critically important to maintain and manage the integrity of the space. But from two specific lenses here, buyers can very easily leverage DV solutions to both help monitor and prevent CTV campaigns from running on those fraudulent devices. And then platforms can utilize DV solutions to monitor and eliminate any fraudulent traffic that may exist within their particular environment. Shifting from fraud to one of the other areas that has some challenges, I think one of the challenges the market still has is this lasting misconception that all CTV ads are viewable. And as Shannon just alluded to, we know that is not the case from our recent study last year, where DV found 25% of the leading CTV environments and apps continued to play ads when the TV was turned off. This was called TV off, and it is estimated to cost advertisers more than $1 billion in ad spend annually. This was one of the reasons that DV launched our DV Authentic Ad into CTV environments earlier this year. It allowed, again, it's a MRC accredited solution, enabling advertisers to address the evolving challenges that exist within CTV, like i.e. TV off, and offers deeper insight into whether the ads that they're buying actually have an opportunity to make an impact with audiences. So lots of movement. This is an area of hyper focus for DV and an area that we are thrilled to continue to excel in moving forward.
Well, let's dig into video viewability in particular. Shannon, for you, what has your experience been with measuring viewability and optimizing towards viewability specifically in video? Is this now table stakes? Does the market still need education on how video viewability can be measured and optimized toward?
I think it is table stakes, but still, I think needs a little convincing for some folks, because I was one of those people that needed a little convincing. So for a very long time, we lumped our video and display buys together. Display is our lion's share of activations. We were concerned about scale. We were concerned about the CPM increasing too on video. It's already a little bit higher. So we did do a lumped approach, but that goes back to some of those tests that I mentioned. And that was inherently a misconception, because now we take a tailored approach, and the benefits aren't just vanity benefits. Like, we are really seeing not just better performance by having a curated video solution, but also better costs, to be honest. So we always talk about this is better for safety, better for standards for our clients, but it's also better for all of us as well, between the advertiser and KPM, because we're saving on dollars as well. We're not overspending in different areas. We're not overbidding. We're taking a more curated approach, which is really what's sold us, as usually it does for buyers. So that's why we found that it really does work in that way. And we mix it with different pre-bid rails than we would also for display. And the combination of the two has been really impactful.
Great. John, does that align with what you've seen across your clients in North America? And if you have any commentary on LATAM as well, I'd welcome that.
Yeah, of course. So in mature markets like North America, viewability measurement en masse is achieved. Maybe market ubiquity is an overstatement, but fairly broad adoption and scale. That said, to Shannon's point, I think there's always an opportunity for continued education across the broader video space to make sure this positive momentum continues moving forward. That said, and as we kind of hone in on LATAM specifically, we're talking about a market that is still, what I would call phase one of their journey, which is we finally are beginning to scale, and there's a much more acute focus on the impact of media quality and performance across the region en masse. Huge amount of focus on driving efficiency and impact with every dollar. But again, there's some work to do there. And as it relates to video viewability, again, I would say that is still early days. Now, as we're looking towards a future state, the opportunity ahead looks to evolve a conversation that has traditionally been rooted in viewability, right? The opportunity to be exposed to an ad, to one that will be rooted in attention and performance, right? So measuring the impact and resonance of a specific ad experience built on top of the highest level of media quality. In this instance, it would be the DV authentic ad, to help drive business outcomes that matter. That is where I see the future moving. It's been referenced as viewability 2.0. I think that is probably not the right phrasing here, but we are very much in an evolutionary state. While there's still some work to be done at the ground level, I'm excited about the prospects moving forward.
Great, and we will talk more about that in just a few minutes. But first, I want to get more into Verify Everywhere. So Shannon, despite post-bid quality, kind of stabilization across the industry that I was covering earlier, it seems like every time there's a new platform, there are new quality issues that arise. We've certainly seen this with new social media platforms, of course, and new and emerging areas like gaming and audio too. So retail media networks, I have to ask you about, of course, they're really coming to the forefront of advertising strategies. They're coming up more and more in our conversations with our clients when it comes to quality in those environments. Can you tell us about the role of quality in retail media networks and how you're seeing that evolve?
Yes. So we try and take a mirrored approach to how we view our shoppers in general at Kroger. So as a retail media is unique because we have such a trusted relationship with our shoppers. We transact media and impressions across all channels, but those impressions are our shoppers which we are committed to serving because we use all of our first party data. So as with most publishers, on-property buys, as called out in the report, do have naturally less fraud, especially on our retail sites because the CMS is operating a little bit different. It's unique to the point where there are ongoing discussions on how it should be measured in the verification space as well, and the technology supporting it. Lots of search auctions and different mechanics versus just standard display ads. Luckily, on our side, we have a little less issues with the viewability front because our tech physically only fires an ad when it's in view, which is something that, we would really push other advertisers to also embed because we are not loading pages at the bottom of the site, even though you're not scrolling there. We are truly only firing it based off of when the search is active and when the ad is physically in the scroll view and the ad slot is being triggered. But as we've talked about, everything off property or audience extension, like social programmatic, audio, CTV, naturally have more of that volatility when it comes to brand safety because the publisher content isn't necessarily in your control as much as the buyer. That's why we say it's imperative for all retail media networks to track verification no matter what, regardless of the client's preferred brand safety guidelines provided. Based on the huge number of brands we support, any news or content can put us in a precarious light if not proactively approaching new inventory and asking the questions of how can we protect ourselves, how can we protect our clients, and how can we work with you, Double Verify, as our different partners to help us stand up that ubiquity across all of these different types of platforms.
And to your earlier point, you need to also protect Kroger, right? Like you're
Yes.
thinking of two brands always with every campaign. Really interesting. John, on your side, can you talk about what you're hearing from advertisers, how quality has actually become a crucial component of nascent environments, especially retail media?
Of course. So, quality and performance matters everywhere and to every responsible marketer aiming to drive impact and efficiency from their marketing investments. Obviously, Shannon and Kroger represent that mindset. But it's really important, again, as RMNs are beginning to scale in market, retail networks, are beginning to scale, but this is not an entirely new concept, right? So while the scale is nascent, the category has been around for a number of years. And again, they understand the importance of media quality being that strong foundation. So for DV, retail media networks represents a rapidly growing segment and an area that actually uniquely taps into the full scope of DV solutions extending across both platform as well as the pre and post bid advertiser solutions. That said, to Shannon's excellent point, the unique aspect of this is the triumvirate of players that are coming together, right? So ensuring that we're driving alignment between all parties. So it's DV, it's Kroger, it's retailer, it's brand, it's the sub-retailer brands, et cetera. Bringing those parties together is where the business magic happens, right? And the opportunity for continued innovation resides moving forward. So, It's important for retail media networks. Again, this is a space that's continuing to get increased investment, but with that, the expectations for accountability increase as well.
Great points. So let's talk attention now. Shannon, I think we all can admit that attention is a bit of a buzzword across the industry right now, but we're definitely seeing that it's being taken more seriously by brands, especially those who are looking to measure performance in a privacy-friendly way. How does KPM view attention and its role in evaluating the efficacy of campaigns?
Yeah, to be 100% honest, KPM is at the very start of our attention journey, as I think most are. We tend to be a little more skeptical of anything until we measure it ourselves based off of our closed loop sales measurement and how it really impacts that long-term value for ourselves and our brands. We really want to look at a lot of mixed factors in that as well, because we have anything from short 4-week flights to long 6-month flights. So there's a lot of other dimensions that can play a role in some of those attention results, laddered back to ultimately sales. So this year, our team is actually going to do a lot of that historical research, thanks to that reporting being available. Now we will be looking and tracking down our own POV based off of those other impacts of attention. Did it truly provide a long-term reaction? Is it more for awareness long-term? And what are some of those other dimensions that have to be tied together with attention in order to create a full-scale optimization strategy for depending on the campaign and the partner?
I think there's a lot of shared experience across the industry on that, right? It being a little bit at the beginning of the kind of attention journey. So, John, I mean, there isn't an industry consensus yet on measuring the impact of attention on consumer behavior and, of course, you know, long-term end business outcomes. So where do you see this heading?
Sure. So, you know, I'll take a slightly different approach here. While it's still early days, the topic of attention has been one that has been bandied about for years, and huge amount of discussion talking through the pitfalls and opportunities. I actually see attention's moment emerging, shifting from its original origins of being rooted in campaign insights and measurement towards one that is rooted in data activation, right? Leveraging these privacy safe performance signals across all facets of campaigns, all types of programmatic efforts, et cetera. But an important note here, and you touched on this in the question up front, is there isn't a defined set of standards for the space, and certainly none that are adopted by the broader marketplace. So you will have industry organizations like the IAB Task Force beginning their efforts to drive towards that definition. That said, in our research and many other brand-specific activations, it is already abundantly clear that its attention does have an impact on consumer behavior and business outcomes. And we've monitored that impact across a number of brand awareness and performance-oriented campaigns. For brand awareness campaigns, we hone in on a suite of measurement metrics under the halo of exposure. So we're measuring the prominence and intensity of an ad experience. On the performance side, or the DR side of things, we're looking at engagement metrics, which is looking at the variety of interactions that may be happening on a particular ad, or at its most simple level, ensuring that there's actually a human behind those interactions. So we already have that outcome-based narrative with some of the largest brands in the world that we're thrilled to see, and gives us the confidence that there's true opportunity ahead of us. You know, and then finally, you know, DV's Authentic Attention solution has recently been accredited by the Media Rating Council, which is really important, as they have a very rigorous independent third-party evaluation process that met their aggressive standards. So we're quite proud of that achievement. We're the only one in the space that have secured the MRC accreditation. But again, I think as the market moves towards accelerated adoption in the years ahead, the ability to activate these high quality data sets is going to give marketers that are, you know, early days a unique competitive advantage as they continue to understand and leverage what the true drivers of campaign performance are. So I continue to be bullish on the space. It is certainly early days. However, I think there's a lot of business performance that we can point to that suggests this is more than just a concept and has the opportunity to turn into a scalable business practice in short order.
Attention is here to stay, huh? So let's look to the future. This is my crystal ball question for both of you. Can you each tell us what innovations and trends you see emerging in advertising in general, looking out into the next year or several years? We'll start with you, Shannon.
Yeah, I think overall, if I had to distill the momentum to change in the last couple of years, thinking about a lot of different topics and buzzwords that we hear very often at various conferences or in the trade publications and things like that, it's really been focused on becoming a better industry now, not just a profitable one. I would say, we've all seen these phases of this industry come to life. First, there was the phase of just general efficiency with programmatic and being able to avoid direct IO on every single buy and be able to use ad servers instead of manual touch points. Then there was the phase of elevated tech where we're able to validate everything, the emergence of double verifies of the world and everything like that. Enter audience and behavior targeting in its many forms. But in the last 5 years, I think the core themes are about taking a step back, doing what's right for brand shoppers and the planet and privacy. So all of those things are encompassed less in about just serving media and more about doing it well. Examples being obviously the shift into things like first-party data and the usage of closed-loop measurement to validate the ads that are being served. And then if you think about the obvious other end of the spectrum, which we all talk about, is a cookieless world and being more privacy compliant, even the new laws passed by additional states for privacy. Thinking about sustainability efforts and focus on DE&I, making programmatic almost like less of a bad guy in the industry in a way. Sometimes it gets a bad rap. So we're trying to unpeel some of the things that we've done in the last 30 years and make a better industry, I would say. And John kind of mentioned this before, but all of these have been talked about for a while. So I would say in the last 5 years, we've been talking about these things a lot. And it feels like we're really at a point and a precipice of putting those things into action now. So full teams are being stood up to actually start tackling things like sustainability, attention metrics, being able to create solutions for a cookieless world and making sure that we're all ready for that. And it's just really exciting. You gain a little bit more pride back when we think about these types of activations.
Cool. And what I would add to that, I totally agree on this idea of doing good is good for business. I've been in the space for many years at this point, and the fact that I've started to see meaningful traction against the topics of DE&I, sustainability, really putting a lens on minority investment on minority-owned properties. These are all good things. They're meaningless if we don't make real traction against it. So I see the green shoots here that suggest this is a space that will continue to get accelerated attention and focus in the years ahead. Shannon did a wonderful job of going deeper there, so I'll move on to my other ones. 3 other quick themes here. I think the drive for transparency will continue. While we touched on CTV earlier, there's still much to be achieved in that space. And get us to a level where marketers have the ability to get show level transparency and understand how they're performing at that level. It's a gap in the market, and this is going to require brands, agencies, partners like DV, and the platforms themselves to push more movement in the CTV space. And I could extend that same example into social. We expect there to be massive momentum on this front. As it relates to the work we're doing with TikTok, but certainly the work with Meta, where much of the focus will be focused on, providing brand safety and suitability solutions within the feed. Like, these are massive realms that still lack that level of transparency. So this could have a transformative effect in the market, which I'm excited for. Another area that I think is interesting and I think will certainly be a disruption is this idea of building brands in the age of AI, right? So, AI is one of those topics that gets bandied about quite a bit. There's a lot of optimism and genuine concern in this realm. And to think about the application for brands, right? Now, you've got an opportunity to tap into the wisdom of the crowds, right? Looking at what a ChatGPT brief could look like for creatives, right? Leveraging lots of different historical examples that give you perhaps the most well-rounded insight or view into what a brief should be and could be, and think about the creative implications there as well. I think CMOs, again, are facing a unique challenge as it relates to AI, but I think if done well, I think the fruits could be really positive. And then finally, I'll leave it on a note of optimism. Again, I do believe the industry and the future of this industry is quite bright. Again, I've touched on this idea of doing good is good for business. I think that's an awesome signal for the marketplace. I love the elevated focus on talent development and mentorship that has achieved a level of scale and prominence that I'm not sure existed in the years past. And then a relentless focus and commitment to innovation. I know at DV, this is something that is core to our business and where we place a huge amount of emphasis and focus. I'm excited to see what the marketplace looks like in the next 2 to 4 years, because the last 2 to 4 years look very different than they do today.
Great, thank you both. So I promised we would have time for Q&A, and we do. There are a few pending audience questions, but anything else that comes up, please drop them into the Q&A. This question is about brand safety protection, ABS. Beyond brand safety protection, could you talk about any performance benefits of ABS? Is there a correlation between brand safe and suitable inventory and higher performing inventory? As a smaller advertiser who is less concerned about brand safety per se, is there still a potential performance benefit from ABS? John, you got that one?
Yeah, sure. I'll tackle that. And maybe Shannon could add some color from the brand perspective. So ABS, authentic brand suitability, is one of our most effective product solutions that we bring to the marketplace. At its most simple level, it allows brands, agencies, marketers to build a singular profile that extends across their pre and their post-bid activations. What that does is eliminate brand suitability infractions, right? Which is elevating the ROI of that investment, which can be reinvested and then deployed in ways to drive even greater business outcomes. There are cost benefits for sure. The operational benefits cannot be ignored as well. I know this question is specific to a smaller advertiser. Again, smaller advertisers will absolutely gain in those operational efficiencies. But as you look at some of our larger client engagements, the amount of time that we've saved from deployment, right, for agencies is in the hundreds of hours, right? These are not insignificant statements. It is going to drive greater impact from your investment perspective. You're going to get more output from your teams, and the quality of your media plans are going to improve dramatically. Shannon, I don't know if you have some specific examples you wanted to put out there.
Yeah, we've tested this on and off. So we've tested like a more traditional approach with just several pre-bid rails in silos versus ABS. And we found a lot of success because we had the intuition that even though they have the best of intent, that it was perhaps that the pre-bid rails were conflicting against each other, and the algorithm was getting a little confused on scale and then also bid price. So what we found is that this once holistic solution that embedded all of our safety standards basically into it helped us create more scale, but then also drive down those conflicting CPMs, to be honest. So from a performance lens, definitely, no matter the brand size, that is always going to be a benefit when you can buy more efficiency, but not lose quality. And we saw both. So that was my one note. And then John, you already mentioned the operational focus, because at Kroger, we are a family brand and we also have a lot of brands. You know, if you're in Seattle, we're Smith's. If you're in LA, we're Ralph's. So in order to serve the ad to the right shopper at the right time with the right URL, we have very granular buys. But then we also want to layer on this personalization, as I mentioned. So being able to operationally do that very quickly is huge. Usually personalization comes with time. This does not. So that would be my big plug.
Great, thank you both. Pivoting to a different audience question, with new Facebook and Instagram controls rolling out, there's a benefit to PR risk for bigger marketers. Do you have any data on brand favorability impacts or consumer intent impacts from bad adjacency as we try to make the case to use these controls and others with clients? It's a great question. I don't know if either John, maybe you want to jump in.
Sure. Absolutely, there is clearly an impact here, and certainly in social channels where, a recent stat suggests 63% of consumers prefer companies that share their values and beliefs directly with advertisers. And again, I think consumers put the accountability and responsibility of brand suitability and safety instances on the shoulders of client partners. So, they're very sensitive to adjacencies, they being consumers. And again, you are the company that you keep. So as brands, it is critically important, again, that you firmly establish what those brand safety guidelines are at a global level, at a local level. Understanding the nuances of suitability may differ brand to brand, but it does matter. The responsibility is a collective team responsibility, but at the end of the day, the brand, right, is the one that carries the burden.
Yeah, we released research actually at the end of last year in which 61% of consumers agreed with the statement that they would be less likely to purchase or use a brand again if they saw that the brand advertised alongside content that was false or inflammatory. So yes, there are huge risks to bad adjacency. I love that phrase, actually. I'm going to start using it. So thank you, whoever asked that question. All right, we are right at time, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Huge thanks to Shannon and John for a fantastic discussion. I really enjoyed it. I hope everyone else enjoyed it as much as I did. Our annual Global Insights report is available for download on our website, and this session has also been recorded and will be sent out to all the everyone in the audience for viewing at a later date. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me. Have a good one.
Take
Take
care.
care.